The film begins as Isabelle arrives at her destination in Galicia in August 1998. Stepping off the bus, she casts her gaze upon her surroundings, taking in the new place that will occupy a significant portion of her time. She grasps her belongings and proceeds towards the office, where her internship awaits. In a voiceover, she confides that this will not be her tale, though she wishes it were. Instead, she reveals her intention to narrate a love story that transpired during the summer of 1958 and lasted for nearly 40 years. The subsequent scene portrays Isabelle entering her new workplace. Initially, she finds no one present and calls out for assistance. Eventually, a man arrives and offers her a cigarette, which she politely declines, stating that she does not partake. He inquires about her identity, and Isabelle introduces herself as the intern assigned to this place. The man then takes charge, instructing her to follow him. Isabelle mentions that she was supposed to commence her duties on this day and that someone was supposed to pick her up from the station, but since no one appeared, she came on her own. The man responds, noting that she arrived during lunchtime and reassuring her that the place is not difficult to navigate. They make their way through the shelves, and the man inquires why she chose this particular location. Isabelle explains that she needed to fulfill the requirements for her degree. The man remarks that this establishment is not the New York Times and escorts her to the archive office. Isabelle enters, taken aback, and questions whether he expects her to organize the archive. The man confirms that this is indeed her task and that it will serve as their primary source of income. Frustrated, Isabelle expresses her belief that she may not have been clear enough, emphasizing that, by the end of her internship, she must demonstrate her ability to write reports and chronicle articles. The man confirms that she will indeed perform those duties, specifically focusing on the obituary section. Isabelle pauses momentarily, shocked, and remarks that typically, families attend to such matters. The man clarifies that, while that is usually the case, sometimes they are at a loss for words. He asserts that this responsibility is both a significant and valuable opportunity. In jest, he adds that if he were to pass away, she might even write his obituary. With that, he departs the room, abandoning Isabelle to her solitude. She surveys her surroundings, a room cluttered with documents. Shortly thereafter, as Isabelle begins to organize the shelves, a woman named Laura enters. She inquires about Isabelle's first day, but Isabelle, engrossed in her task, responds that she cannot complain since no one has passed away, allowing her to pen an obituary. Laura presents her with an envelope, within which lies an elegantly scripted obituary. Isabelle, in her resolute manner, provides reassurance that she will peruse its contents with due diligence, but only after she has completed the task of organizing. Laura leaves the envelope behind and offers her assistance, encouraging Isabelle not to be overly meticulous with the archive, as it undergoes reorganization annually. With that, she takes her leave of the room. Later, once Isabelle completes her work, she announces her impending departure. However, a momentary pause occurs as she feels compelled to inspect the obituary left for her by Laura. With trepidation, she retrieves and opens the letter, absorbing its contents. The letter, sent by an anonymous, cherished sender, evokes emotions of a love that has endured for 40 years since their paths first intertwined. Within its words, it is revealed that the sender's dreams persistently feature her, serving as a reminder that an alternate, happier life could be forged together. In the ensuing scene, Isabelle proceeds to her boss's office, clutching the letter, while he remains engrossed in his labor. She proceeds to recount its contents to him, hopeful for some insight. He dismisses the recurring obituaries as unimportant, asserting that they all bear a resemblance. Furthermore, he discloses that the anonymous lover has faithfully sent them for the past decade, always on September 15th, directed to the same woman, Lucia. Inquisitive, Isabelle queries whether he knows the sender, but the man laments the absence of a return address on the correspondence, thereby intensifying the challenge. Having absorbed this new knowledge, Isabelle turns to depart, only to cast one last glance at the man. With a surge of determination, she ventures to inquire about the whereabouts of the remaining obituaries. Subsequently, we witness Isabelle gathering the letters, written by the anonymous individual, and immersing herself in their contents. She attentively reads each one, engrossed in her quest, desperately seeking any clue that might unravel the mystery and guide her toward the source of this elation. Days and nights blend as she remains ceaselessly devoted to poring over the letters, enraptured by their fervent and love-laden expressions. The sender's reminiscences of his initial encounter with Lucia awaken strong emotions, for he admits that she remains captured within the summer of 1958. Isabelle, resolute in her mission, endeavors to unearth the concealed narrative behind these obituaries. She meticulously organizes her findings on a board, gathering all available information, even resorting to researching the locations where this tale has unfolded. Even during the late hours of the night, her thoughts are consumed by this captivating story. She transcribes her musings and impressions, writing her novel El Verano que Vivimos. In the subsequent scene, we are transported back to 1958. A car traverses vineyards, carrying Gonzalo, who consults a roadmap to ensure his correct course. Suddenly, an unforeseen accident befalls him, leaving the car inoperable amidst the vast expanse of grapevines. We observe him trying to fix the mechanical problem, yet ultimately succumbing to defeat, Suddenly, a distant sound of an approaching car reaches his ears, and a woman emerges from within. She approaches Gonzalo, inquiring about the circumstances surrounding his predicament. With a visible injury on his forehead, Gonzalo momentarily stops, silence pervading his contemplation, while we are left to ponder the thoughts pervading his mind. The woman, observing his wound, extends a handkerchief, concerned for his well-being. Gonzalo accepts the gesture graciously, expressing his gratitude. Sensing his need for reassurance, the woman kindly inquires once more, ensuring his safety, and Gonzalo confirms it. The lady bursts into laughter, filling the air with her joyous mirth. But as soon as she realizes that Gonzalo severed the vine, her countenance transforms. The lady holds him accountable for driving his car on such a treacherous road and predicts her father's discontent. Gonzalo awakens from the ground and tenders his apologies, adding that he seeks the Ibanez family, where he was instructed to find a person named Minato. The lady turns her gaze towards him, her eyes meeting his, and a smile graces her lips as she corrects him, mentioning the El Minato vineyard. Gonzalo inquires if she is familiar with it, and the lady gracefully ascends onto her truck, affirming her acquaintance. Gonzalo remains captivated by her, his eyes fixated upon her, while the lady extends an invitation, offering him a ride. Grateful for her kindness, Gonzalo accepts and retrieves his belongings from his car, joining her on the truck as they embark on the journey. Gonzalo discloses his purpose for coming here, to design a new wine cellar. The lady inquires if he is an architect, and he confirms it. They continue their expedition, with Gonzalo stealing glances at her, seemingly enchanted by her allure. They traverse vast vineyards, witnessing the toil of laborers soon after their arrival. Gonzalo disembarks from the car, and the lady acquaints him with the reality that dust will become a constant companion on his shoes. Gonzalo retrieves his luggage and attempts to return the handkerchief to the lady, but she insists it is a gift for him. He then directs his attention to Hernan, who is engrossed in wine tasting. Gonzalo catches sight of Hernan approaching him. Hernan inquires about Gonzalo's appearance, and Gonzalo recounts his accident, believing his car to be in ruins. Gonzalo turns towards the lady who offered him a ride, expressing gratitude, as without her, he would still be stranded in the vineyard. Hernan pauses briefly, expressing his delight in seeing his friend Gonzalo, playfully jesting about receiving a hug. Gonzalo hesitates for a moment, but eventually, they embrace each other. They then proceed towards the abode, strolling amidst the vineyards. As they walk, Hernan seeks updates on Gonzalo's profession and educates him about the unique grapes that thrive in that very soil. Hernan implores Gonzalo to close his eyes and familiarize himself with the scent and melody of the land. Complying with his friend's advice, Gonzalo closes his eyes, and a smile graces his face. He is transported to another existence, one brimming with felicity and serenity. Meanwhile, the laborers continue their diligent efforts, pouring their hearts into crafting the finest wine. Eventually, they arrive at a hilltop where Hernan reveals the border, signifying the boundary between his family's land and his future wife's land. He declares their intention to collaborate. Gonzalo remains fixated, his interest piqued by this revelation. Hernan shares news of his impending nuptials, surprising Gonzalo. In response to Gonzalo's inquiry as to why he was not informed earlier, Hernan explains that certain revelations are meant to be spoken in person, as they are the foundation of their family's future. Gonzalo bursts into laughter, closely followed by Hernan. Then, he embraces his friend, congratulating him on his marriage. Suddenly, the woman we previously caught sight of passes by, catching Hernan's eye. He runs towards her, calling out her name and inviting her to join him for a moment. Introducing her to Gonzalo, he declares her name as Lucia, his fiancée. Lucia warmly extends her hand to greet Gonzalo, expressing her pleasure in meeting him. Gonzalo shakes her hand, remarking that she knew who he was from the beginning. Lucia explains that Hernan wanted to surprise him, preventing her from revealing the truth. Laughter fills the air as they all share in the joyous moment. A smile of happiness brightens Gonzalo's face as he witnesses their affection. In the following scene, Hernan and Gonzalo hop on a motorcycle and set off toward their destination. Hernan mentions that the wine cellar must be ready for the harvest festival. Curious about the date, Gonzalo inquires, and Hernan informs him that it is on September 15th. Gonzalo expresses his concern, stating that 6 months is too short a time to build a wine cellar. Nonetheless, Hernan trusts in his friend's abilities. They continue their journey through the village, delighting in each other's company, until they reach the winery. Hernan reveals that this winery was established by his grandfather over a century ago, starting with the sale of wine in large quantities. Gonzalo is captivated by this revelation. They continue strolling, and Hernan shares that his grandfather ventured to Paris and returned with a dome crafted by Gustavo Eiffel. Gonzalo is taken aback by this surprising fact and rushes towards it, marveling at the winery's architecture and structure. Playfully, Gonzalo apologizes, admitting that he is not Gustavo Eiffel. Hernan then unveils another dream. He wishes to have a wine cellar of their exquisite wine on Easter Island, intending to share his wine with the world. Later, standing on a rooftop, Hernan and Gonzalo gaze at an empty plot of land. Hernan declares that in 6 months, he will witness the fulfillment of his long-cherished dream, the construction of the wine cellar. Gonzalo responds, assuring his friend that he hasn't traveled this far for nothing, and that he will give it his best effort, though he cannot make any promises. Pulling out his notebook, Gonzalo begins jotting down some notes. Despite feeling hungry, Hernan invites him to eat, but Gonzalo insists on finishing his task before returning to the hotel. Hernan disagrees, insisting that Gonzalo will stay at his house. Gonzalo hesitates, not wanting to inconvenience his friend, but Hernan persists, pulling him along. In the next scene, we see Gonzalo settling his belongings in his room at Hernan's house. Hernan's sister, Adela, stands near his door, observing him. As her mother calls her to set the dinner table, she glances at Gonzalo and inquires about his well-being. Grateful for her kindness, he thanks her. Shortly after, Gonzalo joins them for dinner. With the table set, Hernan declares that it's time for a toast. Gonzalo receives a glass of wine, and Hernan places his arm around Gonzalo's shoulder, noting how hard his friend worked to be here and help build the wine cellar. They raise their glasses in a toast to him. In a later moment, as they gather around the table, Adela turns to Gonzalo and inquires if he has truly been to all those countries, to which he affirms with a nod. Curiosity sparks within her, and she asks him to describe his experiences. Gonzalo, with a playful smile, remarks that each place held its uniqueness. Adela, teasingly, pleads to accompany him on his future adventures. However, her mother interrupts, urging her to cease bothering Gonzalo, and she explains that her outspoken nature stems from the absence of her father. Sensing the desire to share, Hernan urges Gonzalo to recount his time in Rome. After a brief moment of silence, Gonzalo's memories surge forth, and he speaks of Rome with fervent passion. It was the first city he explored after completing his studies, and he vividly describes its allure. The city's essence remains etched in his mind, its ancient structures standing resolute with time. They bear witness to its rich history, surpassing the limitations of mere mortal existence. As Lucia engrossed herself in her meal, captivated by Gonzalo's words, she asks if this is what he aspires to achieve, a testament that defies the constraints of time. Gonzalo gazes at her, his eyes filled with agreement, acknowledging the aptness of her remark. Hernan interjects, promising his sister Adela a trip to Rome. After the dinner concludes, Gonzalo retreats to his room, consumed by thoughts of the future. He immerses himself in sketches and drawings, pouring his heart into creating a marvel for his friend. Later, clutching his notebook, he ventures out into the house, searching for a tranquil place devoid of noise. Settling on the veranda, he resumes his artistic endeavors. Suddenly, the sound of Adela and her lover, Curro, sneaking out late at night reaches Gonzalo's ears. They ride away on a motorcycle, embracing their adventure with laughter and merriment. The following morning, Hernan, Lucia, and Gonzalo gathered on the rooftop, overlooking the plot of land where the wine cellar will come to life. Gonzalo presents a sample to his friend, seeking his opinion. Impressed, Hernan declares it to be magnificent. Turning to Lucia, he eagerly awaits her viewpoint. With hesitation, Lucia expresses her belief that, to maximize the use of space, they should construct a larger wine cellar, departing from the familiar patterns. Taking the sample from Gonzalo's hands, she suggests an additional floor, sketching her idea. This expansion would grant them ample room to store brandy barrels, with the leftover space accommodating even more. After a moment of reflection, Gonzalo adds that they could replace the gable roof with 2 concrete domes, similar to the ones seen at the Algeciras market. In doing so, they would attain superior thermal stability. Their eyes meet, sharing an unspoken understanding, and smiles grace their faces as they revel in the success of their plan. Gonzalo retrieves his camera, believing it to be a stroke of good fortune to capture the moment before commencing their endeavor. Hernan stands beside Lucia, and they embrace one another, their joy evident as Gonzalo takes the image. The narrator muses that in that particular summer, everything must have felt different from how it is now. Amid a relaxed afternoon, Gonzalo discovers Lucia through the lens of his camera, immortalizing her essence forever. That single photograph speaks volumes, rendering words unnecessary. He realizes that he will reside within the depths of those eyes for the rest of his days. After capturing the image, Hernan and Lucia join Gonzalo to view it, laughter filling the atmosphere and their hearts brimming with happiness. In the realm of the present, where Isabelle and her employer remain deeply engrossed in the enigma, a tale unfolds. After perusing the essay that Isabelle crafted, her boss asks if she is its author. With resolute affirmation, Isabelle confirms it, expressing her desire to unveil it to the world. However, her boss responds by reiterating his earlier instruction for her to handle the obituaries, returning the papers to her. In protest, Isabelle follows closely behind her boss, ardently asserting that someone has been dispatching these obituaries to his departed wife for an entire decade. She questions him, imploring him to recognize the intrigue and potential narrative concealed within. As he enters his office, the boss dismisses her claims, declaring them unprofitable. Moreover, he remarks that obituaries are typically penned by someone, yet the ones she presents bear no name, merely the initials GM. Furthermore, he asserts that they lack the essence of novelists, they are just mere journalistic endeavors. Isabelle, overwhelmed by disappointment and sadness, heads toward the exit. However, before parting ways, her boss utters the word Santa Coimbra. Bewildered by his utterance, Isabelle turns to him, asking for further explanation. In response, her boss recounts a touching passage from one of the letters. Every sunset brings me a passing memory of you, a dream that vanishes each time. The sunset on the horizon, and the tides separate me from the land, waiting for me when the tide is low. The letter's recitation carries profound significance. In the subsequent scene, we witness Isabelle making her way toward an ancient dwelling nestled by the seaside on a hill. It stands alone, reachable only when the tides recede. Upon arrival, Isabelle encounters a man engrossed in gathering his belongings. As he catches sight of her, he curtly remarks that visits are scheduled for tomorrow. Perplexed by his statement, Isabelle seeks clarification. The man inquires if she is a real estate agent, but she denies such a thing. Instead, she reveals her association with Alfaro de Canteloa and her purpose for visiting the obituaries. Disinterested in any publication, the man named Carlos retreats into his abode, expressing his preference for handling his father's death discreetly. Undeterred, Isabelle follows him inside and asks whether his father has truly passed away. Carlos pays her no heed, but Isabelle extends her condolences nonetheless. Carlos, oblivious to her intentions, questions her identity and her connection with his father. Isabelle assures him that she is not acquainted with him and retrieves a bag from which she produces the obituaries. She proceeds to inform Carlos that she is aware of his long-standing practice of writing obituaries for his deceased wife, a tradition observed every September 15th. She hands him the obituaries, prompting Carlos to question if this is some sort of joke. Yet Isabelle maintains a serious countenance, denying any humor. Drawn closer by curiosity, Carlos accepts the obituaries from her hands. As he pursues them, a smile graces his lips. He advises Isabelle to verify her sources, for his mother's name is not Lucia. Astonishingly, he discloses that he talked with his mother on the phone a mere half-hour prior, and she is still very much alive. He remarks that the woman in question passed away in 1958, a time when he had yet to enter this world. Resolute in her pursuit, Isabelle momentarily withdraws, her expression unwavering. Returning to Carlos' side, she inquires about his father's name. Carlos, intrigued by her determination, inquires as to why she is so invested. Isabelle retorts that she can consult the records if he prefers not to disclose them. Succumbing to her insistence, Carlos reveals that his father's name is Gonzalo Medina. Isabelle presents him with evidence, the abbreviation GM, a symbolic sign of his father's name, as signed in each obituary. And she asks him to listen to this letter that speaks of a moment when the sun sets between the Atlantic and the Cantabric, and the tide separates him from the shore. He implores her to wait for her on the stone porch. She insists that his father spoke of this house, so it must be him. Carlos, swayed by a sudden call, momentarily diverts his attention, but swiftly returns to Isabelle, professing ignorance of her words. He suggests that people are coming to evaluate the house, and, if she doesn't mind, it would be better for her to leave. Isabelle, though angry, conceals her emotions. She tells him that she wrote an article about his father and will leave him a copy, and then she departs. In the hush of darkness, after a heartfelt conversation with his fiancée, Carlos chances upon a photograph captured by his father in the year 1958, a testament frozen in time, depicting Hernan and Lucia entwined in their affection. Intrigued, he takes hold of the article given by Isabelle, starting a journey through its pages. With measured steps, he ventures beyond the confines of the house, seeking solace upon a rock that rests upon the shore. There, he reads, absorbed by the revelations unraveling before him. And in a sudden realization, the truth dawns upon Carlos. Isabelle's words ring true. A cinematic flashback transports him to the year 1958, where Gonzalo, immersed in contemplation, beholds Hernan and Lucia reveling in each other's company. As they bask in the spectacle of a Taurus valiant battle, their souls alight with the taste of fine wine. In an unforeseen moment, Lucia's gaze lingers upon Gonzalo, drawing him into her sphere. Hernan introduces his friend Juan to Gonzalo. A joke escapes Juan's lips, jesting about Gonzalo's ambitions to cut the world in half. Laughter ensues. Curious, Hernan queries Gonzalo's silence, while Juan extends his assistance, inquiring about the ongoing construction. Lost in his musings, Gonzalo murmurs assurances that all is well under his watchful eye. Juan playfully reminds him of the extensive workforce Gonzalo has seized, to which Hernan playfully retorts, affirming that he is paying them. Gonzalo's smile blossoms, and his gaze meets Lucia's, reciprocating her radiant smile. The camera's lens zooms, capturing Lucia's countenance, where a world of concerns hides within her gaze. Later, Lucia's sister approaches her, inquiring about her wedding. Swiftly, she lends a hand, unzipping her sister's dress before retreating to the veranda, her eyes fixed upon Gonzalo. Her sister, baring her soul, confesses that her husband has the power to cause an earthquake beneath her feet, She paints desire with words of a different hue, transcending boundaries, likening it to a precipice where vertigo seizes the senses. Meanwhile, amidst her sister's discourse, Lucia finds herself adrift, lost in contemplation, her gaze upon Gonzalo. She experiences a sensation unknown and unfelt in her heart. Her eyes remain fixed on him as he engages in conversation with Adela. As her sister adorns herself in her dress, she joins Lucia on the balcony and compliments the architect, acknowledging his handsome appearance. She praises his scholarly pursuits and his ventures far and wide, proclaiming that fortune will favor the woman who captures his heart. Jokingly, she mentions Adela, Lucia's sister-in-law, harboring an affinity for him. Lucia turns, observing their animated exchange. Her sister wistfully expresses her yearning to relive her youth, but it's too late for mothers, while Lucia, perplexed, queries the meaning of her reference to mothers. And in a matter of seconds, a sudden realization dawns upon her, the profound understanding that her sister carries life within her, a tiny being growing beneath her heart's embrace. Overwhelmed with joy, she showers her sister with heartfelt congratulations as they embrace each other tightly. As the sun sets, Hernan and Gonzalo share a moment of camaraderie, savoring their bond before the exhilarating horse race begins. Soon enough, Hernan and a group of men mount their horses, ready to begin the thrilling competition. Meanwhile, a crowd gathers on the beach, their cheers echoing in the air, encouraging the fearless competitors. Amidst the crowd, Lucia and Gonzalo passionately shout Hernan's name, accompanied by Lucia's sister and Adela. Lucia and Gonzalo engage in a conversation, their words filled with warmth. Lucia assures Gonzalo that he will never lack work in this place, and Gonzalo, touched by her kindness, gazes at her, a feeling of flattery evident in his eyes. They exchange a meaningful smile, a silent understanding passing between them. Finally, Hernan emerges victorious, crossing the finish line to the jubilant cheers of the crowd. The atmosphere is electrifying as people celebrate his triumph. Guiding his horse towards Lucia, Hernan leans down and kisses her tenderly, acknowledging her as his good luck charm. As the night falls, Hernan carries Lucia in his arms, ready to take her home. Gonzalo offers his assistance, but Hernan politely declines, leaving Gonzalo to watch them with a tinge of sadness in his eyes. Alone with Adela in the car, Adela's longing is evident as she remarks how she wishes someone would carry her like that. Still young and filled with dreams, she expresses her desire to experience the world beyond this place. She speaks with fervor, her passion shining through. Gonzalo, with a soft smile, confesses that he has traveled to many places. However, there is nothing to envy him about. Adela asks if he can imagine spending his whole life in one place, to which he replies that she shouldn't limit herself and encourages her to explore. Curious about his desires, Adela asks about Gonzalo's decision to leave home early. Gonzalo reveals that he always knew what he wanted to be. She admits that she doesn't know what she wants yet but doesn't want to miss out on what the world has to offer. Sensing her uncertainty, Gonzalo assures her that her brother would never deny her anything. He advises her to talk to him and share her aspirations. Just then, Hernan arrives and joins them in the car. Adela decides to take a walk, and her brother instructs her to go home immediately, to which she obediently agrees. In the next scene, Gonzalo and Hernan find themselves in a lively local bar, surrounded by friends. The music fills the air, its vibrant melodies captivating their spirits. While Hernan flirts with a woman, Gonzalo takes the opportunity to remind him about Lucia. Hernan shares that he knew her before he went to college and that when he saw her again, he knew she was the one he wanted to spend the rest of his life with. Curious, Gonzalo inquires if Lucia feels the same way, which Hernan affirms, sparking laughter between them. Hernan, curious in return, asks about Gonzalo, playfully mentioning that his sister has her eye on him. Jokingly, Gonzalo retorts that he's marrying her tomorrow. They continue to enjoy themselves, immersed in the moment. In the present moment, Carlos visits Isabelle. As he enters, he asks her sincerely if she truly intends to write about his father, and she affirms her determination. Carlos grants her permission to publish it, expressing his desire to discover his father's true identity. With a mix of anticipation and curiosity, he hands her a photograph, a picture of Hernan and Lucia. Isabelle takes a moment to contemplate it, her eyes fixed on the image, considering the possibility that it could indeed be Lucia. Carlos explains that he needs to read the obituaries, but more importantly, he longs to unravel the mystery of his father's past. He reveals that his father spent many years living abroad before retiring here, and he might have published more obituaries during that time. Drawing closer to Isabelle, he retrieves the photograph from her and leaves the room. Later, in a conversation with her boss, Isabelle musters the courage to request a few days off. Mr. Mauricio reminds her that she has just begun working there, but she explains that he had inspired her to explore and discover stories that would open her eyes. She emphasizes that she is determined to uncover the truth behind the obituaries and assures him that she already has Carlos' permission. Mr. Mauricio reluctantly agrees, hoping that she will return with a compelling feature. Before departing, Isabelle asks for the use of the company car, and her boss grants her the keys. Soon after, Carlos waits for her by the beach, bidding farewell to his lover before ending the call, and they embark on a long journey together. On their path, Isabelle plays music and sings along, immersing herself in the melodies. Carlos gazes at her, captivated by her spirit. Suddenly, Isabelle turns to him and asks if he would like to hear something different. She turns off the radio and hands him his father's letters, urging him to read them. Through those letters, Carlos's father confesses his disbelief that such events could unfold, as they were never part of his plans. Eventually, he realizes that some things are beyond his control. He compares the death of a beautiful flower, like a rose, to a situation that brings no good. Returning to the year 1958, Gonzalo wakes up to the sound of someone calling out for his friend Hernan. Hernan inquires about the chaos, and he learns that the roses have withered. Filled with anger and sadness, Hernan inspects the roses. Gonzalo joins him, seeking an explanation for what has occurred. Hernan declares that the phylloxera pest was eradicated long ago, making this situation impossible. Frustrated, Hernan instructs his workers to investigate the other vineyards, believing that the sons of wealthy families are causing harm that could ruin the harvest for the next 10 years. In the subsequent scene, Hernan engages in discussions with his family members about the issue at hand. Gonzalo also joins them, attentively listening to their conversation. Hernan's mother insists that they should halt the construction, but Hernan disagrees, determined to push forward. Just then, Lucia enters the room, revealing that she has spoken with Juan Pedro and learned of a similar outbreak in France that was successfully eradicated. Hernan decides to go to France that afternoon, but Lucia expresses her desire to accompany him. He declines her request, explaining that he needs her to oversee the construction of the wine cellar. Hernan's mother reinforces her son's decision, telling Lucia to remain behind and trust Hernan to handle the situation, emphasizing that it is a task for a man. As Hernan starts to ascend the stairs, Adela intercepts him, seeking to speak with him. However, he dismisses her, believing it is not the right moment. Later that night, Gonzalo drives Hernan to the station as he prepares to depart for France. Hernan implores Gonzalo to promise him that he will continue the construction and that he will take care of resolving the credit issue. Gonzalo, with utmost certainty, assures him that all will be well. With a tender touch, Hernan presses his lips against Lucia's, bidding her farewell and entrusting her well-being into Gonzalo's hands as he departs. In a short while, Gonzalo and Lucia find themselves inside the car, embarking on their journey back home. As their path unfolds, we catch a glimpse of Isabelle and Carlos in their car. However, let us rewind to the past for a moment, where Gonzalo is engrossed in the construction site. His vigilant gaze oversees every action and task at hand. Taking a brief pause, Gonzalo announces his intention to step out of the bustling construction zone. In the subsequent scene, we witness Gonzalo entering a wine cellar, with Lucia already present, meticulously inspecting the barrels. He joins her, expressing his realization that he has never explored this particular part of the cellar before. Enthralled by its charm and ample light, Gonzalo draws closer to Lucia, who reveals that her grandfather, a cooper, imparted invaluable knowledge to her. While admitting her lack of winemaking expertise, she confesses to being well-versed in the art of caring for the wine. Curiosity piqued, Gonzalo inquired about the barrel's distinctive markings, to which Lucia explains it as a long-standing tradition. She further elaborates that the content within remains a mystery, preserved within the barrels for years before being transferred to the cellar. Gonzalo's curiosity persists, prompting him to ask why it is called cellar. Lucia simply tells him that it rests on the ground. Their eyes meet, and a shared smile encapsulates their unspoken connection. Later on, they wander through the wine cellar, with Lucia marveling at the impossibility of recreating such an ambience elsewhere. The weight of time seems to defy these walls. To commemorate the moment, they raise their glasses in a toast, savoring the essence of this shared experience. Suddenly, a voice calls out for Lucia, informing her that the workers have ceased their labor, leaving the construction site deserted. Gonzalo and Lucia find themselves stepping into an old coffee shop. Gonzalo approaches the chef and inquires about what happened. The chef reveals that he granted the workers a day off because they refused to continue working without payment. Romeo passionately declares that if they aren't compensated, the vines will be left to wither. Lucia assures him that they will receive their wages. Romeo, having finished his drink, rises from his seat and reveals the responsibility he carries to provide for 8 children. Lucia follows him, seeking to understand his needs. Romeo expresses his desire for a gesture that would restore their trust. After a contemplative moment, Lucia offers him her gold ring as a guarantee. Should he not receive his due payment, he can sell it for compensation. Romeo promptly agrees, and Lucia requests his return to work. Shortly thereafter, as Gonzalo steps out of the coffee shop, Curro approaches him, introducing himself and offering his services. However, Gonzalo advises him to consult Hernan upon his arrival. A sense of desolation and disappointment fills the young man's heart. Later, as they journey homeward, Gonzalo expresses gratitude towards Lucia for her actions. Modestly, she claims her fiancé would have done the same, yet Gonzalo insists that it was her who accomplished it. Suddenly, a question arises within him, and he asks about the destinations of the roads they travel. Curious to know where these paths lead, Lucia questions his genuine interest, which Gonzalo firmly confirms. As they arrive at their destination near a tranquil river, Lucia ascends to the truck's rooftop, while Gonzalo retrieves his camera. With a sense of tranquility, Lucia shares that this place serves as her sanctuary, a hidden realm where birds soar and nature flourishes in all its grandeur. The view before them takes their breath away. Inquisitive, Lucia asks Gonzalo about his plans once the wine cellar is completed. Gonzalo gazes at her and admits his uncertainty. He confesses that he applied for a scholarship at a studio in Barcelona, yet he remains undecided. Lucia acknowledges the distance, but Gonzalo highlights its proximity to renowned artists like Rubio and Berenguer. Gripping his camera, Gonzalo captures images of the world surrounding him, with a special focus on capturing Lucia's essence within his photographs. Lucia's face lights up with a smile as she mentions how close he will be to the sea. She adds that if the scholarship doesn't work out, he can always return to the southern region. Gonzalo, filled with admiration, captures Lucia's beauty through the lens of his camera, trying to immortalize her essence from various angles. Eventually, she requests the camera from him, and Gonzalo willingly hands it over. With a sense of playfulness, Lucia snaps a picture of him aboard an ancient, weathered boat. Gonzalo approaches her, eager to show her the art of capturing a moment. He gazes at her passionately, his eyes brimming with love. Later, back at their home, Gonzalo and Lucia find themselves in a dark room. Gonzalo is engrossed in preparing the photograph he took, while Lucia expresses her fondness for the way he looks at her. Curiously, Gonzalo asks how he appears to her. Lucia's response is simple and heartfelt. He looks at her just as he does at that very moment. Their eyes lock, and they become entranced by each other's gaze. Once the photograph is ready, Gonzalo takes it and carefully places it alongside their other cherished pictures. A moment of silence envelopes them until Lucia breaks it by mentioning the upcoming fair. However, Gonzalo reminds her of the significant amount of work he still has to complete. Yearning for companionship, Lucia confesses her reluctance to attend the fair alone, and then she departs, leaving Gonzalo lost in thought. Returning to the present, we find Isabelle and Carlos in the car, driving through Valencia. Carlos shares that it has been years since he last visited this place, as he was sent abroad to study around the same time his parents divorced. Carlos confesses that architecture was never his true calling, despite spending 5 years in Manchester only to end up working for his father-in-law's company. Just as Isabelle stops, she curiously asks Carlos if he is married. Carlos corrects her, stating that he is engaged, and reveals that their wedding was postponed due to complications involving his father. Sitting together on the steps of a building constructed by his father, Isabelle inquires if his father ever mentioned or spoke about Lucia. Carlos admits that his father was not one for conversation, and they had never been close. He reflects on his father's detachment from both him and his mother. Meanwhile, Isabelle munches on a snack, attentively listening to Carlos's memories about his father. Carlos recalls a childhood memory when his parents took him to a fair when he was just a small child. He vividly remembers how his parents strolled hand in hand, united. He continues, recounting an event when they passed by a clock shop, and he was captivated by the timepieces displayed in the window. Among them was a watch with a silver sphere, revealing its intricate inner mechanism. Carlos confesses his desire for that particular watch, but his father shook his head and pointed out that he didn't even know how to read the minute hand. While acknowledging the truth in his father's statement, Carlos admits that he simply enjoyed watching the movement of the hands. Years later, as they bid farewell at the airport, his father presented him with the very same watch he had longed for. Isabelle observes that he is not wearing it now, to which Carlos reveals that he has lost it. Before long, they reach the newspaper archive on the 6th floor. Carlos stands while Isabelle diligently searches the computer for any clues. Upon discovering something significant, she takes notes, absorbed in her findings. Later, as they sit in the car, Carlos anxiously asks if she has uncovered something substantial. With a sense of triumph, Isabelle confirms her breakthrough, having connected all the pieces of the puzzle. She hands him a letter and encourages him to read it. Carlos's heart sinks with disappointment as he reads the letter his father left behind. The words were penned while his mother and he were at home, and now Carlos questions his father's actions. Determined to uncover the truth, Isabelle suggests they search for the remaining obituaries. Carlos takes a deep breath and begins to read the letter, which says that no one could have foreseen the profound impact of Hernan's departure. This unexpected journey takes Gonzalo down a road he has retraced countless times in his memories, defying the relentless passage of time and leading to days that can never be reclaimed. Isabelle, moved by the letter, expresses her longing, yearning for someone to write such heartfelt words for her someday. In a flashback to the past, during a bustling fair, Gonzalo finds himself swept amidst a sea of people, searching for Lucia. Finally, she appears, and with a beckoning gesture, she leads him into a place filled with music and dancing. The atmosphere is alive, with the music enveloping the air. Gonzalo takes a sip from his drink, and as his eyes meet Lucia's, a smile passes between them. At that very moment, Lucia invites him to join her on the dance floor. Though initially hesitant, Gonzalo reluctantly declines. It is then, in that instant, that he realizes he has fallen deeply in love with Lucia. His adoration for her shines brilliantly in his eyes as he watches her dance. However, suddenly, she vanishes, leaving Gonzalo searching for her among the crowd. His frantic search leads him to find Lucia in a precarious situation, confronted by a man attempting to harm her. Gonzalo instinctively intervenes, pushing the assailant away, but in return, he receives a blow to the face. Lucia pleads with Miguel to leave Gonzalo alone, aware that he is inebriated. Later, while driving, Gonzalo abruptly asks the car to stop. He steps out and calls for Lucia to follow. Oddly, he bursts into laughter, leaving Lucia bewildered and questioning his state of mind. Gonzalo runs and finds himself perched on the rooftop of the truck, still laughing. With confusion fading away, Lucia joins him on the truck's roof, and together, they share contagious laughter. As they stand side by side, they hold hands briefly, their physical touch rekindling their passion. Gonzalo tenderly cradles Lucia's face in his hands, caressing every contour. Tears well up in both their eyes, conveying volumes of unspoken emotions. It is often said that the eyes reveal all. In this poignant moment, rain begins to pour from the sky, adding weight to the silence surrounding them, laden with their shared feelings. Once again, they burst into laughter, reveling in the joy of the rain. Seeking refuge from the downpour, they find shelter in an abandoned house. As they step inside, their bodies draw closer, and they share their first kiss, a passionate, fervent embrace. Shortly thereafter, we see Lucia straddling Gonzalo, their lovemaking an expression of their deep passion, and their kiss is a testament to their boundless desire. Returning to the present, in Puerto de Sagunto, we find Isabelle and Carlos. The truth has been revealed to them. Carlos's father had an affair with a woman who was already engaged. Yet Isabelle corrects Carlos, emphasizing that his father had shared an intimate connection with someone he genuinely loved. She presents him with another letter, the first his father ever published when he began his life in this place. The letter speaks of unfamiliar streets and his return from the place where sorrowful verses still reverberate, a reminder that certain pleasures are fleeting, but their impact remains eternal. As Carlos drives the car, Isabelle remains engrossed in a phone conversation, searching for further information. Carlos steals glances at her, his expression betraying a sense of transformation. Eventually, he musters the courage to ask about the contents of the obituary. Isabelle reveals that someone did pass away that summer, but it was not Lucia, it was someone else. In the year 1958, amidst the construction of the wine cellar, Gonzalo toils away, his focus on the task at hand. When Lucia approaches him, her voice gentle and curious. She yearns to share something special with him, and he willingly agrees, leaving his work behind. Together, they embark on a journey, riding in the car until they arrive at their destination, the lighthouse. As they step out of the car, a sense of wonder fills the air. Gonzalo gazes at Lucia, struck by the magnificence of their surroundings. He confesses his desire not to cause harm to anyone, emphasizing his friendship with Hernan. Yet, Lucia draws closer, her lips meeting his in a fervent kiss, a fusion of passion and love. In the embrace of their desire, they surrender to their emotions and become one, while the lighthouse silently bears witness to their union. Later that night, beneath the comforting glow of a crackling fire, they find solace in the embrace of the sandy beach. Gonzalo asks Lucia if she knows the legend of the Taj Mahal, but she admits her unfamiliarity. With tenderness in his voice, Gonzalo begins to recount the story, a tale of an emperor who built the majestic structure in honor of his departed wife. Tragedy struck when she passed away during childbirth, leaving behind 4 final wishes. The emperor vowed to be a devoted father, to remarry, to construct a tomb in her honor, and to visit her grave on each anniversary of her death. Lucia, captivated by the tale, inquires if Gonzalo fulfilled his wife's wishes. He confesses that even after 5 centuries, he remains faithful to his promise. Overwhelmed with emotion, Lucia turns to Gonzalo, tears shimmering in her eyes, and implores him to join her. Together, they recline, finding comfort in each other's arms, until the dawn breaks. But as the sun ascends the sky, a cruel twist of fate reveals itself. Hernan, Gonzalo's friend, returns from France, unaware of the passionate affair that unfolded in his absence. Lucia and Gonzalo, caught in the throes of devastation and disappointment, bear the weight of the looming threat to their relationship. Words escape them, and in silence, they make their way to welcome Hernan, their hearts heavy with unspoken grief. Hernan embraces Lucia. Concerned, he inquires about Gonzalo's troubled face. Gonzalo, filled with a sense of abandonment, remains silent, grappling with the harsh reality that his lover now rests in the arms of another man. Left alone in the car, he feels a profound emptiness. Later, as the festivities unfold, the atmosphere brims with merriment, owing to Hernan's return. Songs fill the air, accompanied by enthusiastic applause that echoes through the halls. Gonzalo presents his sister, Adela, with a radiant dress, her joy evident as she embraces her brother. Spinning her around, Gonzalo's eyes catch a glimpse of Lucia dancing with Hernan, his laughter mingling with his triumphant declarations of love and fortune. Jealousy and frustration consume Gonzalo's heart as he witnesses the woman he loves slip away. Amid the revelry, Lucia abruptly departs, and Gonzalo follows in her footsteps. Meanwhile, Adela approaches her brother, seeking a moment to converse. She confides in him about Curro, a matter that requires his attention. However, Hernan dismisses the topic of conversation with the claim that he has already refused him. Unrelenting, Adela pleads for Gonzalo to grant him a chance, raising the possibility. She insists on finding a job for Curro, but he refuses adamantly. Their disagreement escalates into a heated argument. Adela protests, wondering why she can't accomplish anything on her own. However, her brother firmly grasps her face, pleading with her to refrain from yelling. Suddenly, he pushes her away, explaining that he does so out of love and a desire for her to have a better life. Adela falls silent, her eyes welling up with tears. In a somber tone, he questions her about her lack of communication with Gonzalo. Adela, her voice trembling, responds with resignation, acknowledging that it's what he wants. She leaves him alone, finding solace in the company of a cigarette. Meanwhile, Gonzalo compels Lucia to seek refuge in a secluded room, hidden from prying eyes. Anxious and fearful, Lucia pleads with him to stop, fearing they will be discovered. Despite her resistance, Gonzalo persists in his advances. She continues to push him away, evading his attempts to kiss her. But eventually, their longing overpowers their restraint, and their lips meet in a passionate embrace. At that very moment, they hear footsteps approaching. Lucia swiftly exits the room, while Gonzalo urges her to meet him later that night at the vineyard, their special meeting place, at 10 o'clock. As Lucia departs, Gonzalo follows closely behind. To his surprise, he finds Adela standing there, yet he fakes ignorance, pretending they were never together. He checks her expression intently before departing. However, Adela senses that something is wrong, leaving her feeling unsettled. In the subsequent scene, after Hernan's discourse with Romeo, Lucia descends the stairs, her face pale. Concerned, Hernan inquires about her well-being. She explains that she sought a moment alone to compose herself, as she had been overcome by a sudden rush of emotions. She asks if she can go home, and Hernan agrees to accompany her. Upon arriving at Lucia's house, after a tender kiss, Hernan assures her that he hasn't forgotten about her. He presents her with a box and implores her to open it, revealing a stunning necklace. With anticipation, Lucia turns around, allowing him to clasp it gently around her neck. Curious about her demeanor, Hernan inquires about her troubles. However, she simply expresses exhaustion, attributing it to a long week of work. Grateful for her efforts in saving the winery, he bestows upon her a ring, sliding it onto her finger and tenderly kissing her hand. He then kisses her lovingly before bidding her farewell. Lucia enters her house, her mind consumed by a whirlwind of thoughts, rendering her unable to think clearly. Later, at the appointed time of 10 o'clock, Gonzalo waits anxiously at the vineyard for Lucia's arrival. Suddenly, he spots her car approaching. Hurriedly, he hops in, asking her to leave with him. Overwhelmed by their longing for one another, they lean in and engage in a passionate, fervent kiss until a nearby noise startles them. Filled with panic, Gonzalo asks Lucia to return home, while he chases after the person who has stumbled upon them. In his pursuit, Gonzalo witnesses Adela falling to the ground, and Lucia approaches her, realizing it was she who had discovered their secret. However, Adela swiftly resumes her escape, with Gonzalo hot on her heels. Desperately, Gonzalo calls out, begging her to stop and allow him to explain. But before he can catch her, tragedy strikes, and Adela plummets into a deep, dark pit, the sound of her fall echoing ominously as she plunges into the water below. At that moment, Gonzalo is overcome with the realization of her death, his anguish scream piercing the night. In the subsequent scene, Gonzalo cradles Adela's lifeless, battered body, filled with sorrow. He enters the house, repeatedly calling out for Hernan, his voice full of grief. He ascends the stairs and discovers Hernan utterly bewildered. Gonzalo approaches, his voice trembling as he confesses that he is clueless about what happened. Restless and unable to sleep, he wandered into the vineyards, only to be startled by a piercing scream. Describing how he hurriedly fled upon discovering Adela's death, Gonzalo's words hang heavy in the air. Hernan, unable to find words, his eyes brimming with tears, rests his head against Gonzalo's, seeking solace in their shared grief. Overwhelmed by emotion, he then places his head on his sister's lifeless body, and weeps inconsolably. Finally, he gently cradles her body and lowers himself to the floor, releasing a torrent of anguished sobs. The following morning unfolds with a scene of heart-wrenching sorrow at Adela's funeral. Hernan appears devastated. Lucia, a comforting presence by his side, offers comfort as he receives condolences from people. Meanwhile, Curro remains trapped within the confines of the church, unable to comprehend the reality that his beloved is gone forever. Outside the church, as Adela's grieving family emerges, both Lucia and Hernan follow closely behind. Gonzalo, positioned nearby, steps forward and offers Hernan a sincere apology. As the rain pours from the sky, they make their way to the cemetery in a somber procession of cars. Inside one of the cars, Lucia embraces Hernan, their tears mingling as they mourn their profound loss. The night falls, casting a shadow over the village. Drunk and consumed by anger, Hernan instructs his friends to abduct Curro. They take him to an abandoned house, and soon Hernan joins them. Accusing Curro of his sister's murder, Hernan relentlessly demands an explanation. However, Curro, tormented and covered in his blood, vehemently denies any wrongdoing and professes his love for Adela. Ignoring his pleas, Hernan subjects him to a merciless barrage of blows, threatening his very life. In his agony, Curro implores Hernan to release him, but he remains unyielding. Gonzalo, unable to bear witness to this brutality any longer, intervenes, urging Hernan to spare Curro. Yet Hernan, consumed by anguish and unable to think clearly, implores Gonzalo to step aside. Recognizing the depth of Hernan's sorrow, Gonzalo makes another valiant attempt to halt the assault on Curro, who is barely clinging to life. However, Hernan wrenches Curro by the neck and asks him to leave the village and never return, for should he be encountered again, Hernan vows to take his life. Returning to the present, Isabelle and Carlos arrive at one of Gonzalo's remarkable creations, a social housing establishment. It stands as a testament to his vision, designed to provide a self-sufficient community where every basic need is met: spacious, well-appointed homes, food, stores, and laundry services. The person in charge explains that Carlos's father, consumed by a need for protection, avoided venturing outside. Isabelle concurs, noting the absence of windows and the hermetic nature of the building. The man adds that comprehending such motivations can be challenging, perhaps a matter of practicality, but not in Gonzalo's case. Carlos, seething with anger, confronts him, demanding to know how he could make such a claim and accusing him of being subjective. Undeterred, the person reveals that he worked closely with Gonzalo in Alicante, sharing influences and concerns. Returning to the past, we witness Gonzalo immersed in profound sorrow at the construction site. The vineyard now bears Adela's name as a testament to her memory. Months have passed, and the harvest season has arrived. Laborers carefully pluck the grapes while Gonzalo, Lucia, and Hernan stand united, their feet rhythmically pressing the fruit, releasing its essence. In due time, the day of the wine cellar's inauguration arrives, christened with Adela's name. Gonzalo stands before it, a witness to the miracle he has created. The night descends, enveloping him in solitude as he wrestles with his inner turmoil. The sorrow etched in his eyes speaks volumes of the battles fought within his soul. In the next scene, we witness Lucia's desolate entrance into her home, moving as if devoid of life itself. Her father asks if the architect has departed, to which she replies with a heavy heart that his departure is scheduled for the following day. Lucia proceeds to sit beside her ill father, who gives her his pendulum. Tenderly, he declares it as hers now, expressing his hope that it will not fail her, just as it has not failed him. Moments later, Gonzalo readies his belongings for departure when Lucia enters in a hushed voice, beseeching him to leave immediately together. An agonizing silence hangs in the air as Lucia awaits his response, only to be met with disappointment as none escapes his lips. As she approaches the door, he finally speaks, vowing to find a car and confess his love for her, culminating in a shared kiss, unaware that it would mark their final embrace. They agree to meet at the wine cellar. Subsequently, Gonzalo writes a letter for Hernan, leaving it purposefully on his table. Gathering his bags, he departs. Later, upon discovering the letter, Hernan starts reading, only to unravel the truth. Gonzalo confesses his overpowering emotions and his love for Lucia, acknowledging that Adela's death was a tragic accident on the night she witnessed their forbidden bond. Overwhelmed by rage, Hernan succumbs to self-inflicted blows, collapsing in disorientation. Meanwhile, Gonzalo rushes to Romeo, entreating him with a car to make his escape with Lucia. Romeo entrusts him with the keys and wishes him good luck, and Gonzalo hastens toward the wine cellar. Upon arrival, his eyes widen in disbelief as the once tranquil cellar now becomes consumed by raging flames. Gonzalo dashes inside, engulfed by the fire, relentlessly searching for his beloved while blaming Hernan for the catastrophic turn of events. Gonzalo's voice resounds through the fiery torment as he passionately cries out Lucia's name, ultimately becoming trapped amidst the searing inferno. Meanwhile, Hernan gazes at the scene, filled with fury and vengeance. As the dawn breaks, a man wrenches Gonzalo from a car, forcibly expelling him and demanding his immediate departure. Through anguished sobs, Gonzalo pleads for Lucia, but the man remorsefully informs him of her tragic death, urging him to flee before Hernan's anger claims his life. Gonzalo's tears cascade down his cheeks ceaselessly, a poignant testament to the immense pain and sorrow that pervade his being. Before leaving him to his grief, the man imparts that the harshest punishment is to endure the sorrowful burden until one's final breath. Gonzalo's tears flow unabated, witnesses to his unending anguish. In their relentless pursuit of the truth, Isabelle and Carlos reach Alicante. Visiting the archives, they seek any documents associated with Gonzalo. A diligent archivist hands Isabelle a document, and as she unveils its contents, she discovers the blueprints of the winery meticulously crafted by Gonzalo. In the subsequent scene, Isabelle and Carlos, clutching the design that belonged to his father, stand atop the rooftop where the picture of Hernan and Lucia was taken, gazing upon the wine cellar. Their journey leads them to a nearby village, where they encounter a stone monument adorned with the names of those who passed away in the 1958 fire. Carlos's heart is gripped by confusion as he discovers his father's name inscribed upon it, Gonzalo Medina. Seeking answers, Isabelle approaches a resident, inquiring about the former proprietors of the winery. The resident reveals that the lady no longer resides in the village and provides them with her address. In the ensuing scene, Isabelle and Carlos arrive at Lucia's residence. They draw closer to the house, and Isabelle calls out, hoping for someone to respond. An elderly woman appears, inquiring if she knows them. Isabelle proceeds to inquire if she is Lucia Vega, to which she receives an affirmative response. Isabelle introduces herself and then presents Carlos Medina, the son of Gonzalo Medina. Lucia, as if recognizing him, approaches with a gentle smile. Carlos takes a step forward, and they clasp hands, finding solace and understanding in each other's touch. Isabelle and Carlos tenderly hand over the collection of obituaries written by Gonzalo, which Lucia reads with profound intensity. Seeking clarity, they implore Lucia to recount the events that transpired. Lucia transports them back to the night of the fire, when she readied herself to join Gonzalo and flee together. Her mother interjects, asserting her commitment to Hernan, and forbidding Lucia from leaving with Gonzalo. Lucia persistently asks to see her father, and her mother directs her attention to the living room, locking the door behind her. Lucia's mind is consumed by anguish. She unleashes her screams and tears, imploring her mother to open the door. With heartfelt desperation, she professes her unwavering love for Gonzalo, unable to fathom a life without him. However, her mother remains unmoved, resolute in her decision to keep them apart. In the present moment, Lucia gathers her emotions and confides in Isabelle and Carlos about her marriage to Hernan. She describes Hernan as a wonderful husband, yet there is a void in their relationship. Though Hernan rebuilt the wine cellar, everything felt different, and they were unable to have children. Tears well up in her eyes as she admits that she tried to find happiness, but couldn't. She confesses that memories of the days spent with Gonzalo always haunt her thoughts. Turning to Carlos, she reveals that his father was the love of her life, even though she lived it with someone else. In the following movie scene, Isabelle drives Carlos back to his house atop the hill. She assures him that she has gathered all the necessary information for her novel, and now it's time to focus on writing. Carlos surprises her by declaring that he will not sell the house. Wondering if he has abandoned his plans to go to Madrid, Isabelle poses the question to him, but he remains silent. Instead, he asks if she knows how the story ends. Their gazes meet, a silent exchange of unspoken emotions. The silence is shattered by the ringing of Carlos' phone. Isabelle urges him to answer his fiancée's call promptly, but Carlos dismisses it, retrieves his phone, and steps out of the car. Taking his luggage, they share one last gaze. The weight of their hearts is palpable as Isabelle drives away, her tears flowing, leaving Carlos standing alone in the middle of the road, watching her departure. Later, as Isabelle is leaving the bus station, her boss bids her farewell, expressing his willingness to welcome her back anytime. Grateful, Isabelle thanks him, and he playfully requests a signed copy of her book. She kisses him before entering the car and taking her seat. Suddenly, a voice from behind startles her. It's Carlos, reminding her that she never answered his question. Recognizing his voice, Isabelle informs him that the story will never unfold as she desires. However, Carlos assures her not to be so certain, for their story is just beginning. As the sun sets, Lucia opens Isabelle's novel, El Verano que Vivimos, and delves into its pages with fervor, passionately connecting it to her own life and reliving the moments and days she shared with her beloved Gonzalo. In the final scene, Lucia, a vision of youth and ethereal beauty, stands poised upon the hill, her gaze fixed upon Gonzalo, a man of striking handsomeness. A radiant smile spreads across Lucia's face as she moves closer to him. In an exquisite union of longing and desire, their lips meet in a kiss, igniting a flame that defies the constraints of time and space. Wrapped in each other's embrace, they stroll hand in hand across the lush green land, brimming with joy. Yet a bittersweet truth lingers in the air. It is an ephemeral and intangible dream. In this ethereal encounter, they remind us that amidst life's sorrows, the power of our dreams can bring solace and respite, if only for a fleeting moment.